And today we're very honored to have Albert Maxey here to talk with us about a day in his life that was pretty special. Mr. Maxey was raised in Indianapolis, and his outstanding athletic abilities landed him a basketball scholarship at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln in 1957. And I think I noticed a large ring on your finger that maybe is associated with
That's associated with, yes.
Well, soon after he joined the police force, where he served for 34 years. When Martin Luther King came to Lincoln in December of 1964 to give a speech at Pershing Auditorium, Albert Maxey, who was then a 25-year-old police officer, was assigned to spend the day with him. We have asked Mr. Maxey to share a few of his thoughts of that momentous day with you. Please help me welcome Albert Maxey.
Thanks, Judy, so much that I get this opportunity. I think I've been doing this over and over again, but it gets better every time you say it, because since 1964, things have looked up, and to be part of that was kind of a shock that it got this much publicity in 2017 and 16, and as we go back towards 1964, but you have to go back further than that, because if it wasn't for me coming from Indianapolis to Lincoln, Nebraska at the time of 1957, you can imagine the fear that I may have had during that time. I was appreciative to get the scholarship to get here, to be here, but I was very proud of my high school in Indianapolis, and you should look that up sometime, Christmas Addicts High School. Today we're celebrating a lot of that history at that school, because it was an all-black school, and based on building a school for the blacks in Indianapolis, it made Christmas Addicts one of the leading schools in Indianapolis. Fortunately, and good fortune for me, that we won a state championship in Indianapolis. You know, the state capital of Indianapolis, of Indiana, is Indianapolis, and they had no longer had any high school in the state capital city to win a state championship until we won it. So I was proud of that. So based on that and some other leading players back there, some people know of Oscar Robertson. Back in those days, he turned out to be one of the best NBA and college ball players in the country. That helped me, because he helped me get the scholarship to Nebraska. And based on black people coming out of high schools at that time, we really built a magnitude of people from black schools getting the opportunity to go to major schools, and I was happy to get the scholarship to Nebraska. However, it does put a fear in you, because you go from all black to all white, and you're sitting in a bowl of milk as a fly, and that's what Marilyn Johnson Farr, Dr. Farr, at Doane, wrote a thesis regards to being in a bowl of milk and being a fly swimming around into that area, and not knowing which way to go to get in or get out. Fortunately, I figured that, you know, I'm here. I got to make the best of it, and that led me to finish my college at the University of Nebraska. Before that, I flunked out in 1960-61, needed a job, and so I walked across the street from 10th and Art Street, and there's a police department there at that time, and I walked in, and I decided that I was going to be a police officer. Not thinking back, I thought, well, goodness, how could I be a police officer? And all the problems and stuff I had with police officers in Indianapolis, by them chasing me from here, throwing rocks and stuff and apples and having a good time with them, here I am on the police department. So that was quite a change in my filling for police officers. Needing a job, it had opportunities. Started in 1961. Before that, you just started to walk beats. You walked from one area of town to the other. That led me into riding in a police car and doing patrolman. I went to school, back to school, which helped me to get back into school from the police department. And one day in 1964, Chief Carroll came to me and said, I need you to be a security officer for Dr. Martin Luther King, and Dr. King is coming into town. And I'm saying, oh my gosh, I heard about this guy. I don't know how I'm supposed to respond to this other than if you see the picture in the paper, I'm standing strong like I know what I'm doing. I'm a little fearful of this creative, intelligent, educated, and on and on and on Dr. King. It just gave me a lot of strange feeling to wait for him to arrive in Lincoln and to meet him. Knowing law enforcement, you talk about politics and religion and all this stuff. As an officer working for the citizens of Lincoln, you don't try to show your politician type of attitude, your religion. You just want to be a security for the city, and you want to be partisan. You don't want to take sides and so forth. So you kind of sitting there like, oh, this guy is really an important person, and you have the responsibility to take care of him. But back in 1964 was a little just different than today. You know, to be protecting people today is probably a pretty hard job. So I'm sitting there, and finally we met. We go to the hotel, and I'm sitting there, and he has his escort person with him. I can't remember his name at this time, but we're sitting there, and he's sitting across the room, and I'm saying, Dr. King, how are you today? I'm here to be your escort, and I'm with the Lincoln Police Department. And all I can remember today is that he says, what's your name? And I told him my name. He says, how did you get here? So then I go tell the story again. You know, the whole thing I know is basketball, and I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana. Oh, Indianapolis, Indiana, I've been there. So we talked about how I got to Lincoln. So I went over that, and he says how long I had been on the police department, which it was like 3 years, and how many black officers are on the police department. At that time, it was only 2 of us. And so he basically said that, you know, I'm happy that you're here. I was happy to be there, and to watch him get himself prepared actually for the speech. He would pull out a piece of paper, he would go over it for a few minutes. He would go to a different room, and he would meditate. It appeared to be just sitting, meditating. He showed a lot of encouragement for me that he knew what he was doing. And when we left there and went to Pershing Auditorium, he didn't say much. He walked up, was introduced, walked up on the stage, never went back to his notes. He just started talking, and it just continued to roll out of his mouth on where he wanted to say and the direction that he was going, and he knew what he was going to, how he was going to end it. Basically, that was pretty much it. I stood at the back of the stage listening to him. I was very proud that I had the opportunity to be with him. Other than that, I just thought this is another minister, and I knew a lot of pastors and ministers that was directed by God to do their thing, and he was one of the top people that I've heard do that. Since then, we've heard a lot of speeches and what he's gone through, and 4 years later, he gets assassinated, and it just kind of broke my heart. But I just still didn't remember too much or talk too much about it, because that was a movement that in the position that you're at on a police department, you have to stand back and let it go. You had to protect the citizens, and in that time you wasn't able to take sides. Of course, since then I've taken sides, and I'm kind of proud of what I accomplished on the police department. Joe Kerr had a chance to give me the opportunity to go to the FBI National Academy in 1973. That was the same year. Starting in school in 1957, and ended up graduating from the University of Nebraska in 1973. Was quite a accomplishment. I was the first person in my family to graduate from the university, and in the University or college. So basically, that's it. He made me proud. I appreciate all the publicity and stuff I've received after that. I'll stand tall in his behalf, as well as being a man of God. The older you get, you start feeling more about why you're here, how long you know, where you're going to do, what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. And I'm happy to be here. If there's any questions, you know, back then in 61 through 1994 when I retired, from there I went to teach in Lincoln Public Schools for another 14 years, if you want to hear about that. Some of the bad times and good times on the police department, they were wasn't all good, but I met some good people. Sometimes I was treated bad, but then I overcame those things. I feel that by staying in Lincoln, Nebraska, did wonderful things for me. My wife at the time moved on up. She was at Claire McPhee, where Judy said she had done her student teaching. My daughters and all my kids went to Claire McPhee, and my other family over here with Cinnamon and Jody. You didn't go to Claire McPhee though, but Cinnamon Jones went there. They brought back a lot of memories. She ended up being from Claire McPhee. They decided to make her one of the what do you call them back then? Before school board meeting, she was kind of president of PTA at Claire McPhee. That led to her running for school board. We won that position for Lincoln School Board, and then 2 years later, she was the president of the board and signed my daughter Michelle's graduate certificate with her name on it, Judy. So that was good. And of course, Governor Axon appointed her to be a senator, and she was a senator for 2 years, and we of course ran for both those offices and failed to get the legislation back. But we ran again for school board, and that's where she retired after 4 more years being a school board member. That is my life. Judy?
Did you ever feel like there was any danger to Dr. King?
No, none whatsoever. It was It was a nice job to have. That never felt threatened in any way. Yes.
Did you drive your police car, or was it a motorcade, or?
No, it was no motorcade. It was really low key. The Methodist Christian women were the people that organized the trip for him to be here. Lee Bullock and several other the people in the city had him. But we just got in the car and drove over, parked right in front of Pershing Auditorium. Got out with really not a lot of people that I recall, being out on the street waiting for him to show up. So that was pretty peaceful.
I wondered how many people came to hear him speak. What was the audience like?
Do anyone remember the number, like 200 or so people? I think that might have been in the paper. But Pershing, would hold, what, 2,000 or 3,000 people. It wasn't, as I recall, that big.
Was it an integrated service?
Yes.
And the Methodist women put on the...
Sponsored him. Yes.
And from the stage, do you remember who was on the stage? Dignitaries or
No.
mayor or
No.
city council?
No, I don't recall. Just people from their Christian organization, as I recall.
It must have been exciting for you.
It was more afterward, yes. I was ready trying to be a police officer, because you see me standing there looking around like, oh, I hope nothing, happens, but nothing happened.
Was he getting any threats at that point in time yet?
Just beginning to get that press back then, because he just won the Mobile Police Peace Prize, and it was just beginning to come out. As a matter of fact, Lincoln might have been the first place he spoke after he received that. So
you brought him into town. You met him at the bus station, train station, airport?
I met him at the Corniska Hotel.
Okay, so you don't know how he got into town?
No,
Or how he left town?
no,
Was he traveling by himself? Or
no. He had a person with him. If I knew this was going to happen, I would have had all kinds of more pictures and stuff too.
You were doing your job. So you
But no, I was doing the job best I could.
Can you talk a little bit about what the community was like in Lincoln in terms of the African American community? And
In 1957, or when I was on the police department. Now, on the police department, of course, as one of the few blacks on the department, I was in what we called back then Malone Center area. We don't like to use T-Town anymore because that was kind of a lower part of our attitude in regards to an area where majority of the black people lived. And actually, Malone Center wasn't the majority of the people. There were people south of town in around 9th to 10th of 7th, 5th Street, off of South Street and south of South Street. But there was a majority of people in the Malone Center area. As a member of the police officer, you did not get that familiar at that time with who's who and so forth. Whittier was going strong and Lincoln High was going strong. Of course, that's in that area. We never had a lot of crime. We had a lot of property damages and assaults and domestics, some burglaries and that type of crime, but everything was not too bad. We started team policing in my area. I worked with making officers friendly type of attitude with other people in the city. So we never had a lot of major crimes during that time. I walked from campus, I guess, before I was on the police department. I just walked to the Christ Temple Mission Church, and that's where I'm at today. It was located right there at 22nd or 21st and Vine Street, and I got familiar with the people in church. When there were people that got in trouble, I had to deal with them, and of course I had trouble being black and being on the law enforcement to protect them, and at the same time, you know, when Martin Luther King got assassinated in 1968, there was things that erupt in Lincoln and in that area at 22nd and Vine Street. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering what type of prejudice you had towards other, or your coworkers towards you.
There were people that I knew were prejudiced. I had an officer that was supposed to be training me when I went into a patrol car, and he raised the window, lowered the windows, and during the winter time, and just wouldn't let me drive, and just treated me terrible. And I found out later that we were not going to get along, and our administrators figured that out, and he disappeared. In any situation, even today, as black people, you're always on, you know, on your little leery on really getting too close to people. You don't know where they're really coming from, and throughout the whole police department, you knew who to be friend with and who to kind of stay away with, because you know their attitudes weren't good. As far as the citizens that I had to work with, I had gone to a lot of houses on domestics or on property damage or something, and then I would get there and they'll say they would rather have another officer rather than a black officer. So went through that because you know, that's during those times. Was called a lot of names, even when Joanne and I had to go out and run for office. We had a lot of problems in certain areas. Seemed like the north east area of town had more problems, and actually in the area of Belmont, where I lived at one time, we had some problems. But if you're strong-minded individuals, that you know where you're coming from and you know where you're going, you know how to get away from that. You don't have to spend no more time with those kind of people, and you feel, if you're a Christian, that God would take care of any situation. He would protect you. And definitely He has protected me the time I've been here.